that not a single thing was about his family, not a single thing was about himself or any other circumstance. It was amazing. I'm sure I'm eagerly looking forward to reading the full book by Srinath. Mr. Srinath, please.
Justice Venkatachalaya, Mr. Srinivas Murthy, Dr. Ramaswamy, Mr. KKS Murthy, ladies and gentlemen. In the preface to Modern English Usage, celebrated lexicographer and grammarian H.W. Fowler analyzes his own book succinctly. I think of this book as it should have been, with its prolixities docked, its dullness enlivened, its fats eliminated, its truths multiplied. As I stand here today, I too think of my book as it should have been. The book doesn't say everything I wanted to say, and not everything I have said has been said in the way I wanted it said. There are two principal reasons for this. The first one, of course, is my own obvious limitation as a writer. The second is my publisher's brief. Stick to Sir M.V.'s economic contribution and thought, and don't you dare exceed 100,000 words. I had to labor under these two limitations to produce this book. It is nearly 6 years since Mr. KKS Murthy, the publisher, procured for me a copy of The Planned Economy for India. It is this book that launched me on this literary journey, and what a journey it has been. Full of surprising twists and turns, the journey has been for me intellectually rewarding and spiritually uplifting. Sir M.V.'s massive achievements as an engineer, as an administrator, as an innovator, as a statesman, his enormous contribution as an economic and political thinker, as an industrialist, his incisive mind, his razor-sharp intellect, his transparent integrity, and above all his burning passion for India, all this in the end left me deeply humbled. In his welcome speech, Dr. Ramaswamy referred to the opinion poll conducted by Deccan Herald. Sir M.V. was elected the man of the millennium in 2006 when the poll was conducted by the paper. What exactly is the reason for the enduring popularity of Visvesvaraya? I think the reason is the man himself. There were few like him. Visvesvaraya had many outstanding qualities that set him apart from his contemporaries. The first of them was his open-mindedness. He was so largely free of the prejudices of his time that some of the views that he expressed nearly a century ago could still be construed as radical. For example, at a time when untouchability was still a practicing creed, when the collective conscience of society was not shocked to see the panchamas, the casteless living in subhuman conditions, Sir M.V. spoke passionately of their economic empowerment. In the end, he writes, much will depend on material prosperity, for nothing levels social position so effectively as economic success. If the lower castes are given the opportunity to amass wealth, members of higher castes will serve under them, and their status will inevitably be improved, and they can associate freely in public and social functions with the upper castes. Likewise, at a time when little girls were married off in a hurry before they could attain puberty, Sir M.V. spoke of the economic empowerment of women. In order to get the best out of the nation, writes Sir M.V., the women folk of this country should be put to work in increasing numbers. Generally speaking, in Soviet Russia, women are not shut out of occupations in which men are engaged. And in Japan, women work alongside men, as also in some states of Europe. If a woman of this country is empowered, please take note of Sir M.V.'s choice of words. If a woman of this country is empowered even to do 2/3 of the work of a man, the capacity of the nation to build up will advance at a bound. Of course, a few may comment that Sir M.V. had a tendency to see everything through economic prism, but as he himself put it very rightly, much will depend on material prosperity. Or as Bill Clinton put it more recently, it is economy stupid. Now, in one of his essays on Voltaire, Morley makes an interesting observation. He who has never left the life of a recluse, drawing an income from the funds, living in a remote garden, constructing past, present, and future out of his own consciousness, is not qualified either to lead mankind safely or to think on the course of human affairs correctly. This observation brings me to the second trait of Visvesvaraya, his intimate knowledge of India and Indian conditions. Visvesvaraya himself had grown up in a dusty, impoverished village in circumstances that were far from comfortable. It is perhaps for this reason he drew his inspiration from and found his mission among the teeming masses of the Indian subcontinent in its heat and dust. It is again his intimate knowledge of the conditions of India that gave him the strength to see things as they were. He did not, for instance, romanticize village life, unlike some of his contemporaries. He did not look on villages as some sort of Elysian region, where one meets with nothing but plenty, contentment, and happiness, where the gale is caressing, where every shadow represents repose. On the contrary, he saw in Indian villages squalor, unemployment, poverty, disease, degradation, and total absence of organization and ambition. It is for this reason that he advocated rapid urbanization and the establishment of many small-scale and cottage industries. He also urged the Indian farmer to take to modern methods of agriculture and the machinery. A moving passage in his Reconstructing India tells us how the lot of the farmer would improve if the measures advocated by him are implemented. He, that is a farmer, he will provide himself with footwear and a more adequate protection against the tropical sun than the mere piece of cotton cloth in which his head is now wrapped. His head is wrapped. He will eat his food not from leaves and earthen vessels, but from plates of porcelain, brass, and copper. As the advantages of modern knowledge are unfolded before him, he will realize that he need no longer go on with his hopeless daily labor, content like his ancestor to scratch the surface of the earth merely to keep life in his body. I now come to the third important trait of Sir M. Visvesvaraya. Visvesvaraya was a visionary par excellence. He had the ability uncanny ability to see the needs of the future and to prepare the country for it. At a time when India did not have adequate motorable roads, he had the forethought to visit automobile factories in Italy, in the UK, and the USA. He held extensive discussions with Lord Austin in London and the representatives of the Ford Company in Detroit, commissioned experts to draw up a detailed estimates for the establishment of an automobile factory in India, conducted a feasibility study, and on his return to India, published his report, An Automobile Factory in the Bombay Province. It is this report that finally led to the establishment of the first automobile factory of India, Premier Automobile Company. Likewise, at a time when the bullock cart was the most popular mode of transport, or perhaps the only mode of transport in most regions of India, Sir M.V. spoke for the aviation industry. With his ability to see through things, he predicted that India, because of its unique geographical position, would become an important aviation hub in the Asiatic region. He went on to predict that in the years to come, air travel would become the most preferred way of traveling, and urged the government of the day to create landing facilities for air taxis, that is small aircraft, in all the major municipalities of India. Later, he played a seminal role in the establishment of the first and the only aircraft factory of India, Hindustan Aircraft Factory, which later on nationalization became Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, HAL. I now come to the most important of all his traits. Sir M.V. was just not an extravagant dreamer, but he was also an extraordinary achiever. When he became the Diwan of Mysore, to rapidly raise the level of literacy, he made primary education compulsory through suitable legislation. To facilitate higher education, he established a university. To increase agriculture production, he dammed the Kaveri and brought vast stretches of land under irrigation. To train farmers in modern methods of agriculture, he established a school of agriculture at Hebbal. It is now called the University of Agriculture Sciences. To encourage entrepreneurs and make the required capital available to them, he established a bank, the State Bank of Mysore. To increase the overall prosperity of the state, he established countless industries, Bhadravati Iron and Steel, Mysore Sandal Factory, Mysore Soap Factory, Mysore Paper Mills, the list can go on. Again, it is his policy initiative that gave sericulture industry in Mysore a shot in its arm, and Mysore grew to be one of the premier silk producing regions of the world. Dr. Rajaram, in one of his recent articles, mentions this fact that it was Mysore silk that was used to manufacture parachutes during Second World War. See, what made Sir M.V. such a great achiever? I think it is belief in himself. When he came up subsequently with his 10 and 5-year plans, Sir M.V. was confident that it was an achievable goal if only Indians shook off their centuries of lethargy and self-doubt. Sir M.V. believed that one got from life what one demanded of it. I bargained with life for a penny. Life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty store. For life is a just employer. He pays you what you ask. But once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn dismayed that any wage I'd asked of life, life would have paid. These lines by Jesse B. Rittenhouse aptly sum up Sir M.V.'s own attitude towards life. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir M.V. was an intensely private man. It is so characteristic of him that he called his autobiography Memoirs of My Working Life. But many stories have been told of Sir M.V., a few true, but mostly apocryphal. All these stories portray Sir M.V. as a very cold, distant, emotionless human being to whom nothing but work mattered. But nothing could be farther from truth than this. Behind that mask of aloofness was the real man, warm, caring, intensely sensitive. A few instances recounted by people who are close to him bear out this fact. One such instance has been recounted by Lady Premlila Thackeray. Sir Vittal Das Damodar Thackeray and Sir M.V. were close friends. It was, in fact, at Sir M.V.'s request, Damodar Thackeray guided the management of the State Bank of Mysore in its formative years. When Sir Vittal Das died, Sir M.V. was in Europe. On his return to India, he called on Lady Thackeray to pay condolences. While consoling her, he broke down himself, unable to contain his emotions. The death of his friend had dissolved the mask and exposed the true man behind it. Another aspect of Sir M.V. Visvesvaraya not widely known was his sense of humor. Sir M.V. had a ready wit. Those of you who have read Sir M.V.'s sayings wise or witty, I'm sure will agree with me. Once Sir M.V. was traveling with a few members of All India Manufacturers Organization. He himself was the founder of that, somewhere between Alvei and Cochin, when he expressed the desire